Welcome back to Beautifully Complex, everybody. I am excited today to have therapist Matthew Fishleder with me, and we're going to talk about a topic that I went through with my own kid several years ago that I think a lot of our neurodivergent kids find themselves in this place at some moment in time, and parents don't know what to do to help because it can feel really heavy and sometimes dark. And so we are going to talk about how to navigate these existential crises that sometimes our neurodivergent teens, I would imagine even young adults, have. But Matthew, will you start by letting everybody know who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a parent myself. I'm a neurodivergent person. I'm licensed to practice psychotherapy in Maryland and California. I work with adults, often parents, that are navigating anxiety, identity, and the deeper questions that come with being human. I could
So
talk more about
necessary.
what it looks like. I could talk more about what that looks like. I feel like we'll touch on it along the
We'll kind
way.
of get there. Yeah. I think the existential crisis, and I don't know if crisis is the right word, but I'm sure we'll navigate that together in this conversation as well, um, is sort of part of the human experience for a lot of people. And it can be really difficult. As human beings, we all have struggle at times. We all have differences. We navigate the world. We take in the world differently. And sometimes our kids get into these places. I know for my own kid, it was kind of this loop. And when he felt like he couldn't get out of that loop or couldn't get unstuck, it got really heavy and really difficult. And fortunately, he was working with a therapist. I don't think he was really engaged at that point, honestly, but it was really difficult. So I'm really wanting to understand where we go as a parent. What can we do that would be helpful? But let's start by really defining what as existential crisis is. And if you want to change that terminology, feel free to do that as well.
Um, yeah, One thing, the word crisis is often thought of as being kind of as when something's at a catastrophic level. And in psychological terminology, or even in the terminology of existentialism, the crisis is referring to kind of a turning point or a potential pressure point in development.
Mhm.
So an existential crisis isn't always a sign that something's wrong. It can be a sign that a young person's kind of waking up to life's deeper questions. And in that sense, it's development. It's not a disorder. It's not a true crisis. In existential crises, someone can be in a psychological crisis. Someone can be at risk of not being safe. The term
Gotcha.
crisis, and this is
That
a
makes
little bit,
perfect sense.
it's sort of the psychological turning point when someone's really starting to ask themselves those big questions like, what's the point of all this? Who am I?
Mhm.
How long will I be here? What happens after I die? It's not just about being like sad or confused. It's about starting to get in touch with the deeper truths about being human or being alive.
I was just going to ask you if kind of this search for purpose and also is in there would also be included.
Yeah, absolutely. Who am I? What am I going to get out of all of this? What is going
Hmm.
to give me a feeling of fulfillment
Yeah. And
and purpose?
where do you
Yeah.
see this sort of start to ramp up maybe? Are there sort of signals for parents that would say, oh, we might be getting to a point where they're really struggling with this, with these thoughts, with these questions?
It's hard to say because kids of any age can vary in how much they're talking to parents. If you're hearing questions like, I just don't, like, why am I going to college? Or what's the purpose of all of this? Or a kiddo talking about a sense of purposelessness, of meaninglessness. Could also look like kids that are withdrawing from friendships, kids that are social interactions, kids that are struggling in classes, struggling with grades or in school. These aren't necessarily a sign that your kid is losing touch with their goals. It's a touch that their brain is reorganizing and reevaluating. What am I doing all of this for?
So some of those questions then maybe are a signal to us to have conversations with them if they're open to it.
To have conversations with them, to ask them if they'd like to have a conversation with somebody, if not with
Yeah.
a parent, with a counselor, with someone at their college, with a college advisor, with someone in the community. But yeah, it's these big realities of being a person that kids are often coming into contact with, and especially for neurodivergent kiddos, having a sense of the challenge of kind of organizing the thoughts in such a way that they're able to really make head or tails out of it. It can be disorienting in and of itself. And when there's a kiddo that or a young adult that is having a harder time maintaining focus, even in their own thoughts, it can be harder to process.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the fact that executive function challenge that a lot of neurodivergent folks have would also make it difficult to work through all these thoughts that you're having and trying to find answers. I hadn't even really thought about that. That's such a good point.
It's a tough one because kid can find themselves in the midst of trying to piece this together, and a bus could go by outside the window, and suddenly there's a sort of reverie about what's going on over there, and any number of ways that the thoughts can get derailed, or even that the process can get wires crossed internally.
Right. And I had read
Yeah.
a statistic years ago that it's more common to have this level of kind of deep thinking about meaning in
Mhm.
kids who are also gifted. Do you think that still holds true?
I do. I do, in that there can be a degree of like hyper focus on something that
Hmm.
once a kid's brain starts to get wind of these existential realities in the world around us, that they can get more focused on it and try and understand in trying to understand it. And depending on what they read, for example, they may find some existential writer that was more hopeful about meaning being something that we create, something that we discover and uncover with time, or something that's a bit more nihilistic, that there is no meaning to be found. And those are kind of places where we can get diverge into a more hopeful or more cynical sort of attitude, especially for neurodivergent folks who might dive into something, so want to learn more about it, read more about it,
Yeah,
about it.
with more technology now, they
Mhm.
have more access to information, but they have access to lots of different viewpoints. And certainly an optimistic viewpoint would be more helpful for a
Mhm.
teenager in development who's trying to figure it out and find their way. I know that you talk about how an existential questioning can really be healthy growth and not actually a problem. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that and how we, as the caring adult in their world, can lean into that same sort of attitude and mindset about it?
These existential questions: who am I? What does it mean to be alive in the world? To be able to some degree make my own choices, and to want those choices to lead to a meaningful life. These are uncomfortable questions. These give rise
Yeah.
to certain kinds of anxiety. I like to call them existential anxiety, not my term. And it can be uncomfortable for the kids asking the questions. It can be uncomfortable for the adults to whom the questions are being posed. Well, if my kid asks me, how do I live a meaningful life? And I'm in the midst of, let's say, being sandwich generation, caring for the generation above me, the generation below me, my parents, my kids, I'm wondering some of these same questions in a very different context. So, as parents, understanding the questions themselves and the discomfort with the, the presence of the uncertainty about these things, not having the answers to the question, can give us a window into what things might be like for our kids. And it can give us a window into how, as parents, finding that centeredness in being aware of what's going on for us can help us to connect with the kid that's in front of us, with our growing
Hmm.
kid that's asking these questions, even just to say, it is uncomfortable not to know what we're here for. It is uncomfortable to think about being mortal, about life being limited and temporary. These are scary things. And just to speak to our own experiences to some extent, broadly, because kids don't always want us to go into detail about our deep emotions, about our past experiences. Broadly speaking, to find some space to validate what kids are going through, because it is uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very uncomfortable stuff. I can feel it in my body as we're talking about it. Like, it's hard to think about these things, I think, for most people. But
Yeah.
then we add like that uncertainty, as you said, can bring with it anxiety. And a lot of our neurodivergent kids crave predictability and certainty. And so this is way outside of that for them, that I think adds another layer maybe of discomfort or anxiety or struggle with maybe feeling stuck in that place. And a lot of us like don't do well with uncertainty. I don't do well with uncertainty. Like I would rather know these things. But how do we teach them that like some things sometimes are unknowable and how to sit with that?
We're in certain ways wired to be uncomfortable with uncertainty as humans, I think, and wired to try to move uncertainty towards more information, towards certainty. Uncertainty is uncomfortable because we're drawn to find some solution. We're drawn to find how can I get more information to understand what I can do? And that's essentially what kids are doing when they're coming to parents or others with these existential questions, especially like you mentioned, those that are on a neurodivergent path themselves can really rely on knowing what's coming next, understanding why am I doing what I'm doing, and it can help to get through that thing. And when it comes to why am I doing this at all, and not having a concrete answer to it that there's real buy-in to, it can be really uncomfortable. So just validating that it is uncomfortable. That I think of something that I went over with my son. He's 6 now, but I think he was probably 4. He started saying to me, he would ask me a question, and I would say, I don't know. Not necessarily a deep existential thing, but why is this way in the world, or how does this work? I don't know. And he would say, well, I don't know either. And I would say, we don't know together. Um, it's a hard thing not to know. And here we are, we're both not knowing what the answer to this is.
I like that together piece that you put in there.
And he
Because
would
now
say,
it's not,
now it's
yeah,
not in isolation. And he would say, I
yeah.
like not knowing with you, Daddy. And I'd say, I like not
Mm,
knowing with as comfortable as we can possibly be in not knowing. It's nice not to know with someone else, to be in not
yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah. That togetherness makes such a difference.
yeah. And it doesn't necessarily take away from the scariness of not knowing. It may diffuse it a little bit, disarms it a little bit. That like
Hmm.
if I don't know and that's scary, but also this other person doesn't know and they're scared, but they're also okay in this moment. And they can stay present and connected with me. Maybe not knowing is a little bit less unsafe than it feels. Maybe it's tolerable.
And it's an adult not knowing. Sometimes that too is like, I'm only a kid, but an adult doesn't even know. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
give them some relief that maybe they're not supposed to know this thing yet. Maybe, or maybe it is a truly unknowable thing. But yeah, that sense of like, let's not know together,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like such a relief to know that somebody else can also have that feeling and be okay, but be in it with you and you're not alone in it.
And it's a lot of what I do in therapy is finding a pathway to be in that place of not knowing with my clients, whether they be young neurodivergent kids or older adults in between. That people often will come to therapy looking for answers, looking for some kind of rescue from what's going on inside, and in part recognizing I don't have the answers. I can be here for the not knowing, and we can not know together what to do about this.
Yeah.
Can be a really powerful place, whether with my own kid or with people that I'm helping, because it's hard not to know. We're in a big picture. There's a lot of not knowing going on right now.
Sure.
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
Very, very uncomfortable. Yep. I think a lot of us are sitting with the discomfort right now and trying to regain that ability of being able to
And,
sit in the fire, kind of.
and we're all here listening to this podcast, not knowing together. And it's
Mm,
scary. It's confusing.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
doesn't make it go
And
away.
then,
Here we,
as much as
yeah.
we want it to, it does not.
We'll look for it too, for someone to come and say, the unknown is no longer, we know what's going to happen. Right.
Yep, it's all for certain. Wouldn't that be great? Maybe not. I mean, there's some beauty in the journey, at least to discovering things and figuring them out. Things that are completely uncertain and unknowable. Maybe there's not as much joy in that or in that path. But yeah. And then with neurodivergent kids, we're also adding this layer of the fact that a lot of them feel things more deeply
Mm.
and maybe notice things even that others might not notice, something that I might not see all the time. My kid sees it or sees a different perspective or asks a different question I hadn't thought of, things like that. And could that be amplifying what's happening for them when they're asking these big questions, when they're sort of struggling with what their path looks like or what the meaning is?
Yeah, it can add to the intensity of the, who call it groundlessness of,
Mm-mm.
um, if there's nothing underneath me, where do I go? And it can add to the weight of that feeling. Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the shared existential journey that you talk about between kids and parents. When I saw that, I was like, ooh, that could have been good to know way back when, right? Like, I didn't think about the fact that we could have this journey together. I was thinking about, oh, this is so hard. He is really, I think he was depressed or close to depressed. Like it was really difficult. And it was something I hadn't thought about. So I would love for you to walk us through what that looks like. I think you've talked about it a little bit in saying like we can not know together. What other
Yeah.
parts of it are there?
I think really comes through in the idea that we can grow our connections with our kids when we are not focusing on fixing, but we're working on
Yay.
accompanying them in the not knowing. Where are they? We try to sit with them and look out their window with them, the window of their journey. When we walk beside them in their questions without being focused as parents on giving them the answers, on fixing the presence of the question. That's where the real connection and growth can happen for both the kid and the parents.
Yeah, and I would think that connection would alleviate some of the aloneness that someone might feel when they're having these big questions. What's the meaning for me, right? Where am I supposed to be going? What am I supposed to be doing? Those sort of things can feel automatically super alone. So just having that person to feel like they're walking it with you or just sitting with you. I wrote down fixing as you were talking, not fixing, because that's our instinct as parents. We want to fix, we want to lead because we want our kids to be happy, but that's
We
not
want
always the best way.
and noticing the discomfort that we have as parents before we respond to our kids
Mm,
can be incredibly helpful when we're able to do it. When we can notice in ourselves where the discomfort is, when we can regulate ourselves, that gives us a more regulated and more centered jumping off point to really connect with and hear our kids. And from there, be with them alongside them as they're trying to navigate these questions, as they're trying to find their own answers for themselves. I'm thinking we were talking. This is, I think, a funny anecdote. We were talking about the wish for someone to just come and give us the answer. The wish for someone to just tell us what is the meaning. And this came up a few weeks ago with somebody who brought up the sort of the metaphor of, I wish that Ed McMahon, just maybe dating us. I
yeah.
wish that Ed McMahon would just knock on my door and show up with a job pack that tells me the next thing I should do with my life and give me absolute clarity that this is going to be fulfilling. This is going to fill me up. And what we arrived at in talking through that metaphor was that by in the absence of that Ed McMahon at our doorstep, finding the little Ed McMahon inside and listening to him, finding that piece inside that's scared of not knowing, and that can find there's some sense of direction for the next best thing.
Next thing.
The next best thing in the sense of the next thing I can do that's the best among the options.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about regulation. I'm wondering about pulling the body in, because we think that we're having questions, it's a mental health thing, but our body is what triggers us to feel unsafe or safe. And when we have these questions and we don't have answers, we're feeling unsafe, we're dysregulated. We're just wondering if there are things that we can do, like somatic exercises, regulation exercises. Could those help also with getting through this period?
For parents and for kids, but in the sense of parents starting from noticing their dysregulation, their sense of like achiness and discomfort. The awareness of that, the noticing of that is a starting point of kind of separating from it, getting to a place where we can make a choice about what to do next. And by noticing, oh, I'm feeling tightness in my stomach, my heart rate's increasing, my palms are sweating. By noticing what's going on in our bodies, we can be able to then make a choice about what we're doing with our bodies, with the body. And that has the effect of slowing down the stress response in the brain. It creates a kind of loop. It's one of the standing theories about this, that the brain dysregulates the body, and the brain notices that the body is dysregulated and further dysregulates the body. And it this way. And when we can notice that we're in that loop, we interrupt it. And when we can say, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, not necessarily counting or doing it a certain way, but I'm going to breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and breathe out. One coworker used to ask me, when they saw that I was dysregulated when I was working in a clinical case management job, used to ask me, Matthew, are your feet on the floor? And I would look at the floor.
Yeah. Let me check.
There they are. Something relatively simple can help us to feel more centered and present and aware of what's happening in our body. And that creates that pathway to make more choices about how we're responding. So when we're uncomfortable being asked these big questions from our kids, when we can take a deep breath for ourselves, we can ask ourselves, probably inside, where are my feet? Are they on the ground? That actually allows more blood to the areas of the brain where you can select how you want to respond to your kid, as opposed to saying, I don't know, go do your laundry, right?
Yeah, yeah. That
Really
reactive response.
Yeah. But that's a big question, man. What's bringing that for you? What's going on, right?
Yeah, such good stuff. And I think connection too, like if we can lean into connecting more with our kid, really fostering that relationship, that will help as well. It's not a direct, I'm going to do this and I'm going to see an outcome with what you're struggling with, but it settles the nervous system. Connection is regulating. We know that then that sense of we're on the same team, we're doing it together, as you were talking about earlier. And there's so many ways that we can try just little small things. 5 minutes of connection. Most teens will tolerate a few minutes at least, especially if you're asking about something they're interested in, right? What is a connection point that you can weave in that can really help as well? A lot of the stuff I didn't know back then that I do know now, I can think of a lot of ways that I wish I had a focus on regulation and dysregulation, but that connection is really so, so valuable.
Yeah. I'd say big takeaway is recognizing that in recognizing that these questions aren't something to solve, we can contextualize them as invitations to connect. When a kid is coming to us in question about this stuff or talking about these big questions, these are invitations to connect. And when we can regulate through our own anxiety, our own discomfort, we can help our kids to approach these questions not from that reactive place, not from a place where we unintentionally might add to their anxiety, but where we can connect with them, foster that connection in the not knowing and in the fact that uncertainty is uncomfortable, but we can get
Hmm.
through that uncertainty and through
Yeah.
that discomfort.
Yeah. Which is tough because we're wired to pay attention to that discomfort and to try to avoid it to protect ourselves. So, like, we're trying to override all this nature within us and our biology to do that. But it is possible. We just have to go at it with attention and take some of these pauses and breaths and regulating moments as you were describing.
Yeah. And remembering that we don't need the perfect answer, we just need to be there.
Such a good
Yeah.
reminder. Yeah.
Mhm.
Such a good reminder. Will you let everybody know where they can find you to maybe connect, work with you, learn more?
Yeah, I welcome contact questions about what I've talked about, or if people that are looking for support, they can find me at growingpresent.com.
Awesome. And I will link that up in the show notes for everyone. I appreciate you being here and sharing in this tough conversation. Like, these conversations are not easy to have when we think about things that are difficult. It can create responses in our own nervous systems, but this is how we get through them. This is how we help others to be able to sit with that discomfort too. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing some of your wisdom and your time with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Penny. It's a pleasure
I
chatting.
will see everybody in the next episode. Take good care.